Vayichan sham Yisrael enged ha'har kulanu ke'echad.
Good Erev Shavuos, if I may say. We celebrate Shavuos and we call it Yom Matan Torateinu, as found in the seder. Actually found also in the Gemara Psachim Samachet Amud Bet. The Gemara has there an argument between Rebbe and Rebbe Lazar as to what is the proper way how to celebrate a Yom Tov. One of them believes that it should be Kulei Lachem. You should be spending most of the day eating, drinking, and enjoying yourself. The other one says, on the other hand, the pasuk said it should be LaHashem. We paskin la'alocha, chetzi lachem, and chetzi la'Hashem. We're supposed to spend half the day in yeshiva or in shul davening and learning. And the other half, after Mincha G'dayla, then you go eat. Probably the reason why we have long davenings on Yom Tov to keep us in shul, at least until Mincha. Allowing us, taking for granted that you started davening at nets, which doesn't usually happen. But that's basically how Ram formulates it. The Gemara there says that Rav Lazar agrees that even if there's a way of fulfilling Yom Tov without eating and drinking, just be having kulei LaHashem, hakol moedim de ba'atzeres b'ino lachem. Everyone agrees that atzeres on Shavuos, you definitely have to have a part of the day dealing with eating, drinking, and rejoicing in a physical way. The Gemara says because it's Yom Shnitna B'Torah, the day that we receive the Torah. Now, obviously, we understand that if the way of rejoicing on Atzeres is defined by the fact Yom Shnitna B'Torah, this we must draw the conclusion that the essence or an essence of the day is the fact that it's Yom Shnitna B'Torah. It's not just haphazard. There's Atzeres, and it happens to be Yom Shnitna B'Torah. That would not at all affect how we're supposed to celebrate or give meaning to the Chag Atzeres. If we believe that Yom Shnitna B'Torah defines how we're supposed to celebrate Atzeres, you must come to the conclusion that Nesinas HaTorah is part and parcel of the definition of what Atzeres is. Although the fact of the matter is that the pasuk does not mention Yom Matan Torah. It's called Atzeres, as the Ramban explains. It means to say it's the day in which we finally take in or internalize whatever we received in Pesach, which is a long thing to talk about. He actually describes how the period of time from Pesach until Atzeres is like a Chol HaMoed. And like the end of the holiday of Pesach is actually Shavuos, Atzeres. It sounds like the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It doesn't mention any way the idea of Matan Torah. At the best, it mentions Yom HaBikurim, an agricultural holiday. Yet it seems to be from the Gemara that Matan Torah is an inherent part of the holiday. Probably deals with the pasuk. The pasuk says that the Yetzias Mitzrayim will end when Moshe says, "Tavdunas Elokim al Har Hazeh." We will ultimately come to Har Sinai and we will serve God, implying obviously that which happened at Har Sinai of the avodah of Klal Yisrael. Well, what was the avodah? Well, the avodah was obviously the korbanos, which were given either on the day before Matan Torah, according to Rashi, or the day after Matan Torah, according to the Ramban, which is called the Korbanos of the Covenant. The Nasiv and Nishma, the Korbanos of the Covenant, by the way, were not said on Shavuos. There was a Machlokes HaRishonim, according to Ramban, it's 2 days and the Mechilta. Either they were said the day before Matan Torah, dealing with the idea that we will accept the covenant, or deal with the day after Matan Torah, that we are going to accept the covenant between us and God. So interesting how people think that Nasiv and Nishma has to do specifically with Yom Shavuos. It's actually either you should be saying it Erev Shavuos or Isru Chag, Yom Tavuach. Well, that should actually be the appropriate times, depending on 2 days in Mechilta, according to the Ramban. Whatever, it seems to be that the culmination of Pesach, that is when we arrive to that peak of the Brisk, of the Nasiv and Nishma, of the Tavdus Elokim Har Hazeh, our service to God on that day, which, well, probably the easiest way is to understand the Ramban, because he's understand that the psukim are sequential, which means literally the day after Shavuos. The day after Shavuos. So it's interesting to note this. So Yom Shnitna B'Torah is very important, but the Tavdus Elokim al Har Hazeh seems to be the service that we serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu, which are the Korbanos, which were the day later. So obviously we have to understand that our Knesset Brisk and the day of giving the Luchot somehow fit together in a group. God came and introduced himself to us in a covenantal relationship. We served him and accepted it the following day. So that process of those 2 days seems to be with the culmination of the Geula process. The Ramban actually writes this when the Ramban writes in his Hagdama to Shmais that we finally became redeemed when we had the Hashras Shechina, which we had at Matan Torah, and then finally afterwards when we built the Mishkan, which we had a mobile Sinai unit, constantly bringing Sinai with us to wherever we went, which was the Mishkan. So we do see clearly that is the Hashras Shechina in context of that covenant, which is the Seif HaGeula, that the ultimately being redeemed, and that gives man his station and his relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. This seems to be obvious. Well, here is where the question rises, and it's a major question. Let's face it, the Torah that we received on Shavuot, we actually never got. Moses came down the mountain, and he saw us already celebrating around the golden calf. We actually engaged in paganism literally 39 days after we heard that we're not supposed to, from the mouth of God himself. And Moses sees that and he breaks the tablets. And we know what Rashi says in the name of Midrash. He basically broke the marriage contract. Well, it means it's a marriage which didn't work. It was never actually realized. It didn't come into being. I mean, the chassan came to the chuppah, and the kala was there, but by the time they came home, she was already with someone else. Why would anybody celebrate that? God, it's a marriage which didn't work. What actually happened afterwards that Moshe went up and prayed a lot, and we did tshuva, and finally, Baruch Hashem, on Yom Kippur, we finally got a second chance. The Gemara says that why is the two most happiest days, Mishnah says in times, during the Second Temple period were Tu B'Av and Yom Kippurim. Why Yom Kippurim? Because that's called Yom Chasunaso, Yom Simchat Libo. It's our marriage. So if you want to talk about a covenantal relationship and a marriage, the marriage that worked and is still working, thank God, is the marriage of Yom Kippur. I don't see anybody, saying Hakol Moedim to Yom Kippurim Be'inun Lachem. We don't exactly eat on Yom Kippur. What's the story? I don't see anybody staying up Leil Yom Kippur, learning Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos, or every Shiurim on Yom Kippur. No, and yet they're all sitting and celebrating this unbelievable marriage, which seems to be was a fluke. How do we relate to that? How do we relate to that? Did we really receive anything? It's funny. The Gemara that we have, you're all learning on Leil Shavuot, you're learning Baba Kama, Baba Matzia, whatever you're learning. I mean, for goodness sakes, don't you realize that that in the first Luchos, they didn't have all that. It says in the first Luchos, all you had was Chamisha Chumshu Torah v'Sefer Yoshua Bilvad. All the other stuff came in the second Luchos. Now, what are we doing? Reading, on Leil Shavuos, all these Gemaras and these different things. That's usually Yom Kippur. You want to do anything at Leil Shavuos, learn Chumash and say for Yoshua. What's happening? The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Vayichan, Hizaru b'zaken sheshachach talmudai. Be wary of the honor of a sage, of a learned person, which has spent his life learning and internalizing God's wisdom. And nebuch, with age, you forget. I can tell you about it. You know what I mean? Even my age, the memory isn't what it used to be. I used to be able to roll it like this, and now it takes time. But there are people which really forget. Nebuch. But you should honor them, even though they can't express anything anymore. The Gemara says why? Because luchos v'shivrei luchos munachos yachad ba'aron. Because the tablets and the broken tablets were found together in the same ark in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Meaning to say that the Zokain that learned Torah and now can't express it at all, he's like the Shivrei Luchos. Which means to say, it's an unbelievable idea here. Shivrei Luchos means to say, right, the letters went up to heaven. There's no way of expressing this anymore. But the core relationship of what that information did to us and what it did to that Zokain, it formed him in his subconscious reality, or maybe even more in his metaphysical composition. That stays. It's just something that he can't express anymore. He's lost the capability of bringing that essential self, which is whoever he is, into expression. Still remember, when I was a young boy, I learned in Hevron Yeshiva. And the Rosh Yeshiva Zichron Livracha was Reb Cheskel Sarna, was a Goyen Godel, a great person. And in his latter years, he had suffered heavily from diabetes. And this had affected his capability of sometimes, thinking, etc. He was in a very bad place. But you always saw his majesty, and you saw even subconsciously how he acted with people. You saw the education and the process that he had done to perfect himself, subconsciously coming out constantly. I'll give you an example. I remember once he hardly could walk. His feet were swollen from diabetes. And not every time could he come up to the yeshiva to daven in Ma'ariv or something like that. And once on Friday night, we see him trudging up, coming up the stairs. It's already after Ma'ariv. And one of the guys asked him, Rebbe, why are you doing this? You missed the minyan. So he says, you don't understand. Tefillah b'tzibur is maybe a d'rabbanan. To say good Shabbos to the boys, that's the Raisa. That's v'afterecha kamaycha, and that's covered Shabbos. You know what? You can see that that's a person which had perfected himself without that's who he was. That's Izaken Sheshachach Talmudai. Can you imagine? It's what it did to his subconscious self. It formed him. It's what it does to his neshama. That stays forever. It seems to be saying in Chazal that Klal Yisrael's relationship with the broken Luchos is the relationship of Zaken Sheshachach Talmudai. We have lost the letters. We did not have the letters or the expression of that original encounter at Sinai, but obviously telling us that there's something there that never will leave us, and that's embodied in the Shivrei Luchos. I'd like to try to understand what that means. Because obviously that we are celebrating on Shavuot, it's not the words, it's not Baba Kamba Mtzio Basra that broke. It's whatever Shivrei Luchos is, whatever Zaken Sheshachach Talmudai is, that we celebrate on Shavuot. I would actually call it the holiday of Shivrei Luchos. That's what it really is. The other stuff is Yom Kippur. And I think what we're really celebrating is that whatever we now do when we learn our Baba Kamba Mitzvah Basra, we're trying to find that in those words, the depth of Shivrei Luchos. There's an old saying that distance makes the heart grow fonder. The Chazal say you really understand your Rebbe and understand what he gave you, what he did to you, only when he passes on. Because when he's around, you attach yourself to the externalities. That's what it is. What did he say? What did this? What did that? Afterwards, you suddenly attach yourself to his silences because you understand what he gave you. The sounds of silence are the heaviest and the deepest and the loudest. But sorry to say, the human condition is you only really attach to that when the other voices are quiet. That's what the Gemara Medrash says. Ein divrei Torah nikvoim ad sheba'aleim ne'asofim. When the divrei Torah of your Rebbe really get, pinned into you, it's when they pass on to another world. When you don't have the capability of looking at him or her or whoever your teacher is in any form of externality. Then you learn the silences, you learn the pauses. You understand not what he said, but why he said. You understand who is the person that because of that he said things. It's a totally different reality. This seems to be what Shavuos is. I'd like to try to explain that in the short period of time that I have here. There's a very common question asked about Shavuos here. Let me explain, give a little Hagdama. You see, all Yomim Tovim, we finish in Tefillah, we say, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Sanctify the Jews and the times. And the Gemara asks the question, you can't have two siyumim, you can't end the bracha with two topics. How can we end the bracha with Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim? And the Gemara says, no, it means Mekadesh Yisrael shemekadshim lizmanim. We say, thank God you have given sanctity to Klal Yisrael, which they are capable of sanctifying time. Equals they're capable of taking time, which in Jewish thought is an entity. This goes into a broad conversation how we define time, but this is not the place, obviously. They take time and make it into a vessel or a vehicle of bringing transcendency, kedusha, into the human experience. They form time. We have to make time. It is only when Jews are mekadesh as a chodesh and they give sanctity to that time, then a date within that month is a kli kibul, a vessel of kedusha. If there wouldn't be a kiddush chodesh of chodesh Nisan, there would not be a Chag of Pesach. It's a Ritvan Rosh Hashanah. If there wouldn't be a Kiddush HaChodesh of Rosh Hashanah, there would not be a Yom Adin, there wouldn't be a Yom Kippur. Mekadesh Yisrael shemekadshim lizmanim. Yes, there's a unique sanctity of the Jews. They are capable of transforming time into a vessel for Kedusha and introducing transcendency into human experience and actually the globe, the universal reality. And that's true for every Yom Tov. There's one Yom Tov which l'chayra has nothing to do with its month, and that's Shavuos. You see, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Daf Vav that Shavuos can sometimes be Hey Sivan, Vav Sivan, or Zayin Sivan. It depends how many days of Rosh Chodesh there are in this Rosh Chodesh Iyar and Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Because Shavuos does not depend on the date, and it doesn't depend on Chodesh Sivan. It depends on 50 days after Pesach. It means to say the 50th day of the Omer, actually 51 days after the first day of Pesach. That's what makes Shavuos. Therefore, hypothetically, if there's 2 days of if both months have 30 days, it's going to end up being Hey Sivan. If one month has 30, the other has 29, like we usually have, it's going to be Vav Sivan. If both only have 29, depending, when the Eidim come, it'll be Zayin Sivan. So in other words, Hey, Vav, or Zayin are the possibilities, pointing out that the Kedushas Hazman of Shavuos has nothing to do with Chodesh Sivan, or with the specific date in Sivan. It's only today that we have a calendar, until we go back to Kiddush Al Piriya, that we're stuck. It happens to be Vav Sivan, because the calendar is set that there's a 29-day Iyar and a 30-day Nisan. But that will change. That will change. So it really comes out that the Kedushas is that which sanctifies, the Kedushas Hazman, which allows for Shavuos, is not Chodesh Iyar, not Chodesh Sivan, but Chodesh Nisan. Once you sanctified Pesach, then 50 days from Pesach equals as we mentioned for the Chol HaMoed of Pesach ends, and that's Shavuos. So Sivan is not in the ballpark. We couldn't care less about the word Sivan. Even if you were not Mekadesh the Chodesh of Sivan, hypothetically, it would anyway be a Yom Tov, because it doesn't say it's in Sivan. It's 50 days from Pesach. It's another factor totally. If that's the case, as I said before, Vav Sivan doesn't mean anything as far as Atzeres is concerned. Now, if we take for granted that Matan Torah is inherently part and parcel of what Atzeres is, then it must be that Matan Torah also is not defined by Vav Sivan, but it's defined by literally, as I said before, the 50th day of Sfiras HaOmer. So, just as Atzeres is 50th day of Sfiras HaOmer, if Matan Torah is inherently part of the identity of Atzeres, that means we look at Atzeres not as Sivan, not as Vav Sivan, but as the 50th day of Sfiras Omer. It equals 51 days from leaving Egypt, because we count the next day. Well, we have a problem. This is a problem which the Kadmonim asked the Magen Avram, brings it the name of the Ramami Pano, Menachem Azariah Fano. He was a great Kabbalist, wrote very important books. One famous book is the Asorim Amoris, quoted quite a few times in Magen Avram. And he asked the question because we know that the Seder Olam writes, and we bring it la'alacha, that Yetzias Mitzrayim was on Thursday. You all know that Yud Sivan, when God commanded the Korban Pesach, was Shabbos. That's why we have Shabbat HaGadol. Well, if Yud Sivan was Shabbos, that means to say Yetzias Mitzrayim with Tesvav Sivan was Thursday. It's a very simple reality. Okay, that means Friday you start counting the Yomer. Well, 49 days after that Friday end what? With the Thursday. The 50th day is Friday, which means to say the 50th day of the Yomer was a Friday. According to this cheshbon, Matan Torah had to be on Friday. And we all know the Gemara says in Shabbos, Hakol Moedim, that Matan Torah was on Shabbos. Implying that Matan Torah, it may have been Vav Sivan, but who cares? It was on the 51st day of the Yomer. It equals a day after Atzeres. So how can you possibly tell me that the essence of Atzeres is Matan Torah? If reality has it, it was done on the 51st day of the Yomer, 52 days after they left Egypt. How more can you tell me this whole idea of Sfiras Omer is counting towards Matan Torah? Well, then we have a lull, we have an extra day in the middle. All these ideas of preparing for Torah, Sfiras Omer's derech eretz kadmala Torah, fixing our personalities in order to receive Torah, don't add up unless Torah was given on the 50th day. So we really have a problem. How do we call it Yom Matan Torah? It's really not true. It may be it's on Vav Sivan. And today, maybe it's that way. The Rivash thinks so. The Rivash actually thinks that inherently it's not, Matan Torah is nothing to do with the 50th day of the Yomer. Matan Torah is Vav Sivan. It happens to be by chance that now, because we have a calendar, hey, Vav Sivan, the 50th day works together, so we call Yom Matan Torah Seinu. But when things will change, we will stop calling it that in the seder. Anybody who realizes that's a very, very hard thing to swallow. Because the Gemara says that the Kiyum Din of Atzeres needs Lechem, because Yom Shnitna B'Torah says it's inherently part of the identity, as we pointed out before. That doesn't work with that Gemara. So either you're going to have to say that they actually think that Matan Torah happened on Friday, which there is such a girsa in the Braisos and Pirkei Rebbe Lazar, but that's not Bavli. And we paskin our halachas through Bavli. Our Bavli has Matan Torah is Shabbos. And yet, it seems to be that the end of Sfiras Omer, the Atzeres, seems to be on Friday. And if that was Vav Sivan, that means Atzeres should be Hey Sivan of that year. That's a problem. Ramami Pano answered the Magen Avram brings it. He discusses two things. Well, I'll explain both. He says, this is really something puzzling. He says, Har Sinai was in Chutz La'aretz. And the Chutz La'aretz there's Yom Tov Sheni. Watch this. And God decided to give respect to Golus and to Yom Tov Sheni, and therefore showed up on Vav Sivan, which was the 51st day of the Yomer. But that's like the second day of Yom Tov. So we start on the first day of Yom Tov, which is 50th. So when Magen Avram brings this down, this is frightening, puzzling. Like all of a sudden he jumped ship and made Yerida, so to speak. What's this? That's really interesting. So basically the core, when did God show up? On Yom Tov Sheni. But the Yom Tov starts on Yom Tov Rishon. This asks us to explain the relation between 2 days of Yom Tov, because that's something really very interesting. And then the Magen Avram also brings another thing found in Ramami Pano, that the pasuk actually says, "V'yu nechonim liyom hashlishi, ki yom hashlishi yered Hashem leinei kol ha'am al har Sinai." That God was actually supposed to show up on the 50th day of the Sefirah. Hey Sivan. But the Gemara says that Moshe Hoisif Yem Echad Midaitoi. Moshe said pshat in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, made a limud, a alfusa, with one of the Yud Gimel Midas Shatar in the Dreshes Bem, and figured that when God said these words, we have to interpret it as saying that we will not see him, or we will not have it until a day later. And he added a day, and the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hiskim L'daitoi. Now, what does this mean? So what did God really mean when he said Yom HaShlishi? Did he mean Hey Sivan, the 50th day of the Yomer, or did he mean Vav Sivan? And Moses figured it out because he intelligently knows how to read the Chumash. What is the relationship between Pshat and Drash? Well, for this I have to read something. Well, I won't read it. I'll just refer you to the source. The Gra has an unbelievable sefer on Chumash called Aderet Eliyahu. In Aderet Eliyahu, Parshat Mishpatim, the Gra elaborates in the beginning of Parshat Mishpatim on the relationship between Pshat, Pshuta Shemikra, and Medrash Chazal. He basically says it's a very bad thing to do to try to think that every Medrash Chazal is Pshuta Shemikra. He really goes after the thinking of the Malbim and the Ksav Kabbalah. He totally disagrees with them. He believes that Pshuta Shemikra is an independent reality, and it's what he calls the emes of Torah. And then there's the drash, which is the practical way of applying it. And we're not going to go here and explain so why do we have to know this? He says, so therefore it's very important to know Pshuto Shemikra, because that's the emes of Torah. I'll give an example. By an Eved, it says that the Eved, if he doesn't want to leave his Adon, so we do Ritzia, we bore a hole near his ear, and it says the pasuk says Vavadola Olam. And Chazal say it doesn't really mean forever, it means until Yovel, till Jubilee year. So the text says he is an Eved La'olam. Just the Jubilee year takes him out of that. But he actually is an Eved La'olam. That's what Rebbe Simcha writes in Meshech Chochmah. Another example. Ayin tachas ayin, yad tachas yad, regel tachas regel. Yet Chazal tell us in Baba Kama you pay money. But the truth is you actually owe him an eye for an eye. And that's what the Rambam says. Where do we learn this money? Because the pasuk says, Lo tikhu kofer lenefesh rotzeach. Yata lokech kofer lenefesh rotzeach, vata lokech kofer leroshe evarim she'enam chozrim. What you're paying is not damages. No one cannot give money for an eye. It doesn't have a market value. I'm sorry. It's priceless. You're actually redeeming your eye, and that we should pluck it out by paying money. It's kofir. Rambam Patzins it le'alacha. That's what the Rambam said, that if you are moide in Bezdin, that you plucked out someone's eye, you don't have to pay. It's like knas. A regular din of mammon, of course you have to pay. You can't be mechayiv al pi atzmacha with a idah of chavala. The emes of Torah is eye for eye. Practical application is redeem the eye with money. The emes of Torah is avadola olam. Practical application is yovel. Let me explain what this means in a deeper way. You see, when you first start learning, you look at Mishnah as these weird stories of people fighting over finding some kind of a piece of clothes in the street. In the first Mishnah of Mitzvah, and you figure people were poor, so I found a jacket. No, I found a jacket. It seemed like people were fighting over clothes. As a child, it was quite perturbing. They must have been very poor. That's my reaction to it. After a while, I grew up and I said, no. This is just a metaphor. It's really a way of telling me that mammon amutal b'safek yachlaiku. If we have money in question between two people that claim it, yachlaiku. Why did they choose this example? Obviously, it was common at the time. But once you understand the depth of it, you realize, forget the example. That's just the external shell. It's the idea. You grow up a little more, and you learn a lot more. You realize all of a sudden that this idea of Mama Mutam Sab Yachloku is not just a rule, it has conceptual underpinnings. It has a whole world of thought behind it, which you can thus extrapolate to other situations and create new laws. You grow up even bigger and you realize that there's also meta-halachic principles behind it. You grow up even more and you understand the philosophical underpinnings and ultimately the metaphysical interpretation of what this means. The more you grow, the more you realize whatever you know is just a mashal to something deeper and more profounder. That's what the Pasuk says. And also, the Chazal, the Torah is called Mashal HaKadmoni. It's the metaphor of Kadmona Shalom, of God's wisdom himself. God's wisdom is infinite. It's infinite wisdom, which is expressed in finite forms of ideas, thoughts, beliefs, philosophical ideas, metaphysical ideas, ultimately halachic ideas, into practical application. But his wisdom is different than our wisdom. Rambam points out. See, my wisdom is nothing more than an accumulation of my experiences, which I basically translated into electrical impulses. And after X amount of experiences, I have a bit of a search engine in which I can move back and forth. What I've done, I've processed my external experiences, and that becomes my wisdom. Should I have experienced nothing else but myself, I would not have any wisdom. Wisdom is nothing more. I'm like a bee hovering between the flowers, taking it in, and basically extracting from it ideas, and that's what I have. Goodness sakes, God had wisdom before he created anything, so he didn't exactly experience anything. The only thing he could experience was himself. So the wisdom of God is not the wisdom of man, which is nothing more than extracting ideas from experiences. The wisdom of God is an expression of the infinite self of God. My wisdom is not an expression of me. It's an expression of my trials and tribulations, my experiences. The wisdom of God is an expression of the essential, infinite self. Get into his wisdom, you have someone got the closest you can to him. It's probably the most unique and only, the most deepest, I would say, way of being in communion with God, by internalizing his wisdom, for his wisdom and him are one. Rambam writes this in two places. God is not just someone that knows, his knowledge is in him are one. Totally different idea. He says that, the pshat in the pasuk, Ki lo machshavotai machshavoteichem. My thoughts are not yours. Your thoughts are nothing more than products of your experiences. My thoughts are expressions of me, my essential self, my infinite being, and ultimately they are finite forms of an infinite reality. When they want us to understand, when we talk about Torah Kadma La'olam, Torah was there before the world. What do you think? There was a book that says Lo Signov, so God's going to create a Ganav. The book that says Lo Shirtzach, because God's going to create a Ritzeach. That would be a bit childish. What it means is the infinite wisdom of God is how he is the core of how he expressed himself in creating a world. The infinite wisdom of God is what's expressed in the creation of neshamas. And the infinite wisdom of God is how he expresses himself in creating the Torah, the applied laws. They are all mishalim, all forms to an infinite wisdom of God, which are expression of self. You know what it's like? It's like a multidisciplined artist with the same idea will express himself in the plastics, in the oils, and in music. And he will see his ideas equally in the statue, in the painting, and in the composition. But you'd have to know him and his mind to see, then you'd also see it all there. But you don't know him. You definitely don't know his mind. So you can translate them as three different entities. The closer you are to him, you realize the unification of it's all. It's all expression of the one God and his wisdom. Infinite wisdom, which cannot be actually fragmented. It can only be expressed in finite form. Now here's something very special. God wanted to give his wisdom to man. Gemara says in Shabbos, do you know what Anoichi means? Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. Anoichi is an abbreviation for a few words in Aramaic. Ano, I, that's the Aleph. Nun is nafshi, myself. Chaf is kasaft, I wrote myself. Yahift, and I gave myself to you. I wrote myself in a book and I gave myself to you via the book. I have given you the expression of my core wisdom, which is ultimately the expression of my core self. That's what we do when we learn Torah. God gave himself to man. But it takes time for man to understand what he got. Many times, your parents taught you things, they want to give you wisdom, and they taught you Aesop's fables, I don't know what. They taught you Grimm's fairy tales. And you didn't realize the wisdom you were giving. You were thinking of stories. Do you know how they formed you afterwards through your life, those fairy tales and those stories? They gave you wisdom. And subconsciously, they formed you. You really think that marriage is giving flowers and diamonds? They're only there as much as they're expressions of the core relationship that man has given himself to wife and wife has given herself to man. If you just give flowers to your wife, you need help. If you give yourself to your wife through the flowers, you're doing good. So God gives himself to man, but man does not always have the vessels to receive it. Oh yeah. We don't have the vessels to understand how God has given himself to us in history. At the most, we're quite angry and we think he's devoid of God. The day will come when we will actually understand that it is all part of God. That's a gemara Psachim Lam Daf Nun, that one day we will understand history. It's frightening to think about it. We'll actually appreciate and love the hand of God in all of history. Something which is frightened at the moment we don't have vessels to receive and understand and comprehend the God of history. We're doing pretty good with the God of science. Well, here's something special. God wanted to give himself to the Jews and gave himself. On the 50th day of the Omer, Moshe understood that, we don't have the vessels. We need another day. So they finally saw the Esha G'dayla and all that. And they finally heard and had the capability of prophecy on the 51st day. But the core reality was there already at the 50th day. God was there. Just not for you to see and comprehend. You know what it is? It's like the silence, which is really there, and the words came out later. Because already there was God giving himself. The Anoichi, Ano, Nafshi, Kahif, Yahif, that part of Matan Torah was given on the 50th day. Just we didn't have the capability of seeing it and even getting it until the 51st. And actually, afterwards, what we got, we lost, as we know, 39 days later. We actually didn't have enough even then. Moshe tried, so that's what it means. The pshat is that Matan Torah is supposed to be on the 50th day. Practical application was going to be the 51st. Mitzad HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was a total giving of himself on the 50th day. We couldn't apply that, therefore we accepted it on the 51st. This is a Maharal in Tiferes Yisrael, chapter 27, which he literally says this idea, well, a bit differently, but basically it's there. So you see, this is what it means. We lost that Kabbalah. Whatever we got on the 51st day, there's nothing worth celebrating. Those Luchos were broken. But you know what? That God gave himself to us on the 50th day? That's still found in the Shiur Luchos. That never changed. We don't celebrate Baba Kamba Mitzvah B'Av Asra on Shavuos. We celebrate the Anoichi, Ano Nafshi Kasaf Yahiv. I have written myself and given myself to you. That's Yom Shavuot Matan Torah. It's not Yom Kabbalah Torah. It's Yom Matan Torah. You did not receive it on the 50th day. And whatever you received on the 51st isn't actually worth celebrating. What you received on the 50th day was his giving himself to you. This is basically the idea of Moshe Hosif Yechad Midaitoi. We celebrate that. We celebrate the fact that this is the day of Shivrei Luchos, which, as I mentioned before, the depth of Shivrei Luchos is so much deeper than the regular Luchos. Because in Shivrei Luchos, we realized a relationship, a core covenantal relationship, which somehow we lose the taste of it now afterwards when we have all the pratim. It's like people getting involved in practical aspects of marriage, and sometimes they forgot, why'd you marry her? Why'd she marry you? Why did you marry her? That's what people forget because they're so busy with doing and not doing. People learn so much and they forget thinking, you know what? This is all comes back to that day when God gave himself to me in this book. That's why if you know the Loch of Birchas HaTorah, which according to Bavli is the Raisa, the Ramban brings it in Sefer HaMitzvahs, it's a bracha to remind you, not about learning, but about Maimet Har Sinai. Always remember, he gave himself to you. That's what this Shavuot is. I want to hope and pray that we will somehow connect to what Shavuot really is. And whatever we do on that day, focus on the fact of Anoichi, Ana, Nafshi, Kasaf, Yahift. Have a great day.
Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged